we have arrived at a place President Trump likely did not see things heading with the Epstein controversy less than 2 weeks ago. It was Monday, July 7th, when the DOJ released a memo essentially closing the book on Jeffrey Epstein, both regarding any so-called client list and any questions about his death. The memo also made clear that, quote, no further disclosure would be appropriate or warranted. That was then, this is now. Attorney General Pam Bondi is working on exactly such a disclosure. Late today, the Justice Department asked a federal judge to make public years-old grand jury testimony delivered behind closed doors against the convicted sex offender and accused child trafficker. This comes after President Trump posted on social media in part, quote, based on the ridiculous amount of publicity given to Jeffrey Epstein, I have asked Attorney General Pam Bondi to produce any and all pertinent grand jury testimony subject to court approval. It's unclear what publicity the president is specifically referring to, but his post came just over 2 hours after this article dropped from the Wall Street Journal. The headline, Jeffrey Epstein's friends sent him bawdy letters for a 50th birthday album. One was from Donald Trump. According to the Journal, the album is from 2003. Here's part of the article about then-citizen Trump's letter. Quote, the letter bearing Trump's name, which was reviewed by the Journal, contains several lines of typewritten text framed by the outline of a naked woman, which appears to be hand-drawn with a heavy marker. A pair of small arcs denotes the woman's breasts, and the future president's signature is a squiggly Donald below her waist, mimicking pubic hair. The letter concludes, quote, happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret. The president's response to that report, quote, in an interview with the Journal on Tuesday evening, Trump denied writing the letter or drawing the picture. This is not me. This is a fake thing. It's a fake Wall Street Journal story, he said. I never wrote a picture in my life. I don't draw pictures of women, he said. It's not my language. It's not my words. He told the Journal that he'd sue them, and late today he did just that. President Trump filing a libel lawsuit against the publisher of the Wall Street Journal and the two Journal reporters on the byline of that story. He is seeking at least $20 billion. Since the DOJ's attempt put the Epstein story to rest inflamed MAGA world, even some of the president's staunchest supporters have come out against the administration. Today, with the president taking on the Journal, he and MAGA world have found a familiar foe in common once again, the media.
Quite frankly, the Murdochs concocted something last night and thought it'd be a kill shot on President Trump. And lo and behold, it's the exact opposite, because President Trump is now on offense. President Trump is best when it's attack, attack, attack. This is the deep state. This is the ruling class in America. They're trying to use it to destroy President Trump.
The president and I talked about that ridiculous allegation this morning. He said it's patently absurd. The president is the most maligned and attacked political figure in the history of American politics. There's no question about it. But he's also the most resilient. Did you see the language of this bogus supposed communication or card or something I supposedly sent to Epstein? He said, I don't talk like that. I don't think like that. They're literally making things up.
Bannon told CNN that the Journal article and the president's response to it has once again united his supporters behind him on an issue that up until just last night had put him at odds with many members of his base. But Bannon also called the push to unseal that Epstein grand jury testimony, quote, a good start, though certainly not the end of the Epstein story. For more on this, we're joined now by CNN senior White House correspondent Kristen Holmes. Kristen, good to have you. I wonder how White House officials explain the president's 180 on the Epstein materials in less than 2 weeks.
Jim, I'm just not certain that it is a 180. I think what we have to do is really see what happens next. There are a lot of people who I have talked to, and these are MAGA loyalists, people who support the president 110% or did until the fallout over these Epstein files, who want to see how this plays out. Yes, they are very happy that President Trump has asked to unseal this grand jury testimony. However, there are a lot of questions as to what happens if the courts refuse to unseal. And why stop at just the grand jury testimony? They want to see more of these investigative files. What they have been pushing for is full transparency, and it's not quite clear that this is what that is at this point. Now, President Trump did obviously have to do something We saw him really on defense, as you heard Steve Bannon there. And that is not a place where President Trump or his administration or his team operates best. They do operate best on the offensive. And this is how they turned this situation, because, as you noted, they now have a common enemy. But here's what to watch for. Where does this go next? Is there more? Is there another turning over of the leaf? Because as we have heard, and as I have spoken to a number of his supporters on, there are still a lot of questions that are not going to be answered, even if the court does eventually decide to unseal this grand jury testimony.
Tell us more of what you're hearing from sources about the libel lawsuit now against the publisher of the Wall Street Journal and those two reporters, up to $20 billion now.
We heard that he was going to do this yesterday. He announced that he was going to be suing it. He even told the Wall Street Journal. But one of the things to really keep in mind here is how quickly they filed that lawsuit. We've never seen something happen this fast. And it goes to show you what we've been hearing, which was that President Trump is incredibly angry. He is incredibly angry that they published this. And part of that anger is at the fact that he spoke to Rupert Murdoch, somebody he's been very close to, someone he's been spotted with in recent weeks. And he says that he was told that he was going to take care of it. Murdoch was going to take care of it. Obviously, that did not happen. So that's part of the anger here. You can see that also in what the president is posting online. He keeps saying he can't wait until Rupert Murdoch has to get deposed. He can't wait till he has to testify in this trial now that he's sued him. He clearly feels an enormous amount of anger at Murdoch, who, again, has been friends with him in the past. We'll see how this plays out in the long run here.
Yeah, certainly not the first time the president's been unhappy with information that comes out that he finds critical or inconvenient. Kristen Holmes at the White House, thank you. Joining me now, CNN political commentator, former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger, Semaphore White House correspondent Shelby Talcott, and former federal prosecutor Jeffrey Toobin. Good to have you all in tonight. Thanks so much. So Jeff, just from a legal standpoint, now that the Justice Department has asked the judge to release the grand jury material, how does the judge then decide what gets released and what doesn't? And is it entirely up to the judge?
It's a very unusual situation, Shudo. This grand jury material is almost always secret and stays secret. There are narrow exceptions for public purposes, but it is unclear whether this applies. That's what the Justice Department is submitting to the judge, saying this is an extraordinary circumstance. But how the judge handles this is really unclear. He may ask for the people who are named in the grand jury testimony, including the people who gave the testimony, to ask them to be heard about whether this should be disclosed. So this process, even though it's not technically an adversary process, there's no defendant here, may take quite a long time. And it's important to remember also that this is just the grand jury transcripts. There is a lot of other material in a criminal investigation that's not grand jury transcripts, and that is not going to be released pursuant to what the Justice Department did today.
Just briefly, Jeffrey, can the Justice Department attempt to get things it finds to the president's advantage released and things not to his advantage not released, or is this entirely the judge's decision?
Well, the judge can decide about the grand jury transcripts. It's pretty much, I think, an all or nothing decision about the grand jury transcripts. But everything else in the investigative material, the FBI interviews, the 302s, the documents that were produced pursuant to subpoenas and search warrants, all the phone records, all the documents that were seized, none of that is going to be released according to what the Justice Department did today, and that is not going to make the conspiracy theorists happy.
Shelby, I wonder, is the White House concerned that there could be more reporting, other shoes to drop, other evidence of connections between Trump and Epstein that could be revealed at some point?
Yeah, I certainly talked to administration officials who have
quietly wondered whether this is sort of the first thing to happen. But I also, I think we can't underscore how much the administration has wanted this to go away. We have heard Donald Trump talk about it publicly over the past few weeks. When I've talked to administration officials privately asking for sort of new commentary on certain issues, a lot of times they've said, we're not going to say anything, right? Don't give this oxygen. It goes away. Of course, with this Wall Street Journal last night, this is sort of a new explosive allegation the president has back into the news cycle, and it brings all of this back up. And so this is not the direction that the administration wants to go, even though the end result of this Wall Street Journal article is that all of those base supporters who were turning against the president are now back on his side.
24 hours ago, you still had some of the Republican Party and the GOP or MAGA world who said, we want all this stuff out there. And now the president has started this familiar back and forth with the media. And it seems MAGA's back on his side. Did you expect that?
Oh, this was inevitable. I mean, this always was going to happen. So what you have is these people that put themselves kind of in a box on the Epstein stuff. They had to be a little outraged about it, but they were begging for a reason to come back. And this happened to be the reason. So this gives them an excuse now to say, well, I'm with the much maligned president. And I got to tell you, Jim, I've never seen anybody that can gaslight as quickly as Donald Trump can. Let's keep in mind, the Justice Department made the announcement. There was outrage on the right about the lack of the Epstein stuff. And then Donald Trump launches his screeds on Truth Social, which were unhinged, and blames Democrats for inventing the Epstein file. And now all of a sudden, he's on the receiving end, gaslighting America to believe that somehow this was a conspiracy against him when they came into power on this. This has been a religion to the right since 2019.
Yeah. I mean, and he's not the only one gaslighting, right? I mean, J.D. Vance was all for releasing the materials. Charlie Kirk, you had other voices, and you're hearing something quite different today. So Jeff, of course, the other issue, the president suing the Wall Street Journal here for libel to the tune of $20 billion. I imagine that's a figure that, somewhat manufactured out of the blue. Is this a case with legal substance?
To use a technical legal term, Jim, read that Wall Street Journal article was lawyered up the wazoo. I mean, it is quite clear they were concerned about a lawsuit, and they did everything possible to make themselves bulletproof from a lawsuit. Donald Trump is a public figure. This is a matter of public importance. Unless the Wall Street Journal made up this book from scratch, which, knowing the Wall Street Journal, I think is impossible. There is no chance that this lawsuit can succeed. If it gets to depositions, which I doubt, I think it'll be dismissed before then. But if it gets to depositions before then, Donald Trump is opening himself up to a sworn deposition about the extent of his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, something I imagine he probably doesn't want to get into. But I think in a perverse way, it will be helpful to him that this case is thrown out at its beginnings, because under the libel law as it exists today, that is surely what's going to happen.
Shelby, might the administration's intention or hope here be to get a settlement? I mean, you've seen other news organizations settle to the tune of many millions of dollars.
Right. This is not the first time we have seen Trump go after the media. The difference here is, of course, he's in office, right? So it's extremely notable that this is happening. It's extremely notable how quickly it happened. We knew that this sort of story was in the works for a few days. The administration knew that it was in the works for a few days. It's entirely possible that he is looking for a settlement here, but it is also, intentionally or not, I'll go back to the fact that this has all united his base. And one of the really big frustrations that the Trump administration was having was that this was sort of the one issue that they could not get the base back on. And it was really the first time in this administration and in the first administration over the past nearly decade that Trump had sort of failed to wrangle back in some of his most diehard supporters, because this Epstein issue is something that they've really cared about, they've really focused in on. And so, intentionally or not, that's the end result of this.
Adam Kinzinger, I spoke to Democratic Congressman Stanton today, who said that there's still a bipartisan effort to call for the release of these documents here. But do you see Republicans sticking behind that any more than they, say, stuck behind demands for, I don't know, saving some money in the most recent budget, or do you expect them to fold?
Oh, I think eventually they'll fold. But look, I mean, by the way, quick point. Today, the Trump administration could release everything besides the grand jury testimony, from what I understand, and they're not. They can. They're going to try to blame the judge, if he says no. But look, the bottom line on this is there may be a few Republicans, like I think of Tom Massey and some of those that'll stick to their guns on this. But ultimately, listen, they are begging for an excuse to walk away from this fight. I've been in these positions. I know these folks. They're kind of like in a corner now, and they're begging for it. And the Wall Street Journal article, which, well said, was lawyered up and I think is very solid. The Wall Street Journal article was just the excuse they could use. It would have been something else if that article didn't come out.
You've made the point that Donald Trump was, in fact, friends with Epstein for a long time. So I wonder, in Trump world tonight, following this Wall Street Journal story, is there concern that there might be other shoes to drop, other revelations showing a connection between the two of them?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard from people within Trump world that there is a panic. I mean, there certainly was leading up to the Wall Street Journal report, and there's still concern. Who knows? I mean, this is a guy that Trump knew for over a decade. Clearly, he had commented multiple times about young women and Epstein, and so it remains to be seen, but I think there is still concern.
Now, you wrote that the right-wing reaction initially quote, was an example of the most unfathomable spectacles, the best media manipulator in all of politics, fundamentally misreading the media landscape before him. Now, that was before you had, like we were showing there, MAGA world uniting around him. Has he successfully exited this dangerous period?
I think for the short term, he sees a way out. And clearly it's this release of the grand jury transcripts, or at least, Donald Trump, not typically the guy who holds judges in the highest esteem, now saying it's just up to the judges at this point. Yeah. But I think long term, I think this could continue to be an issue. I think for Trump supporters, this was maybe like number one or number two issue for them. Justice for Epstein, for the Epstein case. I mean, they thought like top Democrats were going to be on this list, and I think they're going to keep asking questions.
I mean, it's possible that the judge could rule, no, we're not going to release the grand jury testimony. It was meant to be in secret, at which point I imagine that might present Trump with another punching bag in this case and say, hey, I wanted it out, but the judge didn't want it out.
I mean, he could say, well, now we really have to move on. But of course, as we know, the grand jury transcript is just one of many possible sources of documents in this case.
Now, I spoke to Adam Kinzinger just a few minutes ago, and he said that this was predictable in that world, that the loyalty is such that there was going to be something that would unite MAGA with Trump again. Do you see that as lasting? I mean, because the Epstein files were such a rallying cry for MAGA world, and by the way, the vice president and others in the president's circle. Do they abandon that? I mean, it was supposed to be evidence of deep state conspiracies, Democratic ties to Epstein, et cetera.
I think it's a challenge for them. I mean, certainly I think the congressman is right that they wanted an out here. And this was an uncomfortable position for people like Steve Bannon or Charlie Kirk. On the other hand, I mean, there has been years of buildup to this. Do I think the audience is really going to buy suddenly that they're like, all right, well, we just got to move on, particularly when suddenly there's a new Trump connection to Epstein? Yeah. I don't think so.